All right, welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. We got the boys here. We got Jack Butcher, founder of Visualize Value, with his good morning tea on. What's going on, mate?
And then we've got, everybody.
What's going on? And then we got Trung Phan with his special flower shirt hoodie. If old school NIA listeners will know what that is, but he's got his flower hoodie on, and I'm Bilal Zaidi. So we got a packed agenda today, so let's quickly call out what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about the inflection points of Web3. This was a suggestion in the Telegram group. So there's a bunch of stuff to go in there. We're going to talk a little bit about the potential for a bear market and what that might look like. We'll get on to Axie Infinity, the play to earn model, and kind of like that whole world, how it's evolved over time. And then potentially, if we've got time, we'll talk about social tokens as well. So boys, look, the first one we want to talk about is inflection points of Web3. Like, this could be a 3-hour chat on its own. So for the sake of focus, I guess the question, it was from Scott W in the WhatsApp, in the Telegram group. He said, what do you guys think of the key inflection points to watch for in Web3, i.e. Coinbase, Robinhood, modular L2 scaling, memes, etc.? So I'll just throw it out to you guys. When you think of that big question, is there anything that you think of straight away?
No, go ahead, Jack.
I was just going to say the two announcements this week's Coinbase and Stripe. So Coinbase announced that they're launching an NFT marketplace Q4 of this year. So within the next few weeks, and they've got to have something almost ready to go, surely. And Stripe, I don't know I didn't read much into the Stripe announcement, but Stripe are building a crypto team focused. I think they use the language Web3 in the announcement, right? So the implication being that they're going to build the infrastructure layer for tokenized commerce, wasn't that a Patrick Collison interview on CNBC maybe 2 months ago? I think he got asked about crypto, and it's like, yeah, we're not that interested in crypto. And
was that recently? Because I know in 2018, I think that they launched like Bitcoin or some crypto like payments or something, where you could like add that to your Shopify store if you're using Stripe or whatever you're using, and then they got rid of it. So I think a lot of people are saying, oh, you could have done this a few years ago. Like, now you're getting back on it because it's hot again, which is completely fair enough. Like, that's how it goes down sometimes.
They unwounded their team from 3 years ago, which was the criticism. But before you guys keep going on about the Web3 and inflection points, I just want to say is like when we did the spaces a couple weeks ago, and sorry listeners, we haven't been very consistent on that. We've done it one time, so you know the whole thing. I think Jack posted a tweet a while back. It's like, if you do 25 podcasts, you're like in the top 1% of podcasters. We are not in the top 1% of Twitter Spaces. We are. Yeah, we need to come up with thousands of people that tried once.
Just for people listening, because a few people pinged us, if you want to come to the Spaces, we'll announce it beforehand so that you're not like waiting around or whatever.
And we're working on a format exclusive to Spaces that will make sense rather than just getting on.
Well, the reason I brought it up is because the one Spaces we did. Rick Burton, early employee at Stripe, but who ended up leaving. He carried that Spaces for us, but he was bringing it up is like he worked at Stripe. He actually did some early contributions to Ethereum, and now he's very involved in DeFi. And Rick was just saying is like the way he looks at Stripe and Web3 and crypto is like the opportunity set for people in the Ethereum space is like, what can Stripe not do, right? So Stripe right now today, obviously they're massive, $250 billion private company based on recent secondaries. And their whole mission is to increase the GDP of the internet, but they're playing along with the existing systems, right? It's like know your customer, KYC, AML, anti-money laundering. They're very above board with all those things. So Rick was basically saying is like, what will these guys not do because of the restrictions they kind of set themselves in? Like, that's the opportunity set for Ethereum. So I think that was an interesting point based on, Stripe has announced they got more crypto people. It was like, but how far can they actually take it based on the fact that they're playing very much in the existing system?
And we almost used this last week. So if you're in the Telegram group, you heard this announcement. We are officially incorporated, not Investment Advice Media Inc.
Here we go.
And no, we did use Stripe. We used Stripe Atlas to incorporate it. And that, I think, is the most interesting or exciting piece of it for me, is like these guys have the legal firepower and the financial regulation experience to bring some level of like peace of mind to people that are launching and building this stuff. So there are obviously companies and businesses that are not going to even begin to touch crypto because they don't have the in-house knowledge or they don't have the level of confidence in this infrastructure that they would have if someone like Stripe represented it, right? So I think like Stripe building plug and play first is like payment gateways, but you can see them expanding to like DAOs and social tokens and things that are just like regulatory shitstorms for people who don't have legal expertise. You can imagine that's going to be an area of focus for them as well, which is pretty exciting.
Can you imagine like the Atlas thing that we used, like that for a DAO or any of these things, like even creator tokens? Like there's so many things that we don't know what they're going to be focused on. But they've, like you said to me, that it's only a good thing. Like they're obviously legitimate, one of the best companies in the world in this space. They're like crushing the game. And for them to be involved, for them to come into the space, it's going to take things to another level, which I think it needs to, like all the kind of boring stuff, like, you just kind of mention like regulation and stuff like that. Like I fall asleep when I hear the word regulation, but like that's why you pay, Stripe Atlas, where we pay like $500 or whatever to do it in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And in the past, when I've, created LLC or something, it was like me on a PDF, like filling it out and like figuring out what to do. So I think that's a really important thing. The other thing I want to call out is Naval had a tweet this week, which I thought really perfectly encapsulated like what the shift is going on here from Web 2 to Web 3. So he said Web 2 users are the data, corporations own the platform, and the code is closed. Web 3 users own their data, contributors own the platform, and code is open. So if you look at that sort of kind of definition, I think again, like, this is a centralized company. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with centralized companies on their own. But if they are embracing kind of a new generation of organizations and protocols or whatever, I think it's only a good thing. So I think like people like them coming on board, Coinbase, like you said, NFTs, I saw the numbers this morning. Apparently they've already got like several X times of people signed up for the waitlist, and OpenSea does have users or something like that.
Also there.
I don't know if that's accurate, but I saw a tweet, so it must be real.
The funny thing I saw was the site that they built to display the number of signups. The CSS, they didn't code the box to contain the sign-up number with enough decimal places. So it's like the number of people on the waitlist goes outside the box that they designed to hold it. Yeah. So maybe that's just like some funny bug, but it's kind of a quirky observation that someone made. Said like their expectations have been blown out of the water on how many people are interested in getting involved in this stuff. But another massive, massive on-ramp.
Yeah. And then if you think of companies like Robinhood as well, right, obviously a touchy subject in the space given what happened with Wall Street bets or whatever. But like even they're
launching wallets. Yeah,
they're launching wallets. I actually had lunch with someone from Robinhood this weekend who, I won't say the name in case they said something they're not supposed to, but they're working on this stuff, and they are trying to figure out like how to make this super user friendly, the same way the rest of the Robinhood app is incredibly user friendly. And to me, that's kind of like the level of like mainstream adoption will come from companies like this helping it along. I know like pure crypto people kind of hate to hear that because they just, I think a lot of them think like we're in this utopia where there's this decentralized companies and a bunch of people in a Discord creating the next revolution. I think that is happening, but they also, if there's going to be hundreds of millions or billions of people who come into this new ecosystem, they don't care about the word decentralization, in my opinion. Like they care about, is this secure? do I make money? Is this quick? Is it fun to do? Like, you know, all the things, like the benefits basically. And I think like the days of us like writing down a seed phrase on a piece of paper and expecting the whole world to do that is not realistic. So yeah, so for me, thinking of this question, like going back to the question, inflection points, I think we're starting to hit that right now with companies like Stripe, Coinbase, Robinhood, etc. But then the other things I'll bring up and I want to get your take on is regulation and policy, which is a whole topic in itself. User experiences, wallets, and adoption of mobile. Because in my opinion, a lot of the crypto stuff on mobile is like terrible. Like the user experience isn't that great. On-ramps for the general population. So that's like fiat on-ramps, being able to easily, trade stuff. But yeah, so those are a few ideas I had, but curious what you guys think the other components are.
I can jump in with a couple, I think, milestones and inflection points. So the commercialization and improvement in user interfaces is like part of this. I mean, Jack's talked about it in the past, right? It's like if you're a diehard maximalist, whether Bitcoin or crypto, and you're just like, whatever, you have to have the keys like on a metal plate, like under, like Jack does, right? Underneath his dog, a kettlebell. It's like, you're just not going to, man, my parents still can barely use email, right? It's like, how are they going to figure out crypto? But mom still hits me up once a month. You know, the joke about like your parents asking you about the email stuff is like, it still happens, right?
Yeah. 100%.
So like the ease of use is such a big part of it, but I think there's a couple of levels that we'll see. And the way I'll frame it is 50,000 foot. Ben Thompson, Strat Tech, we've talked about in the past, big tech writer. He's written about it. Is like, if you look at how long it took for the internet to develop, right? Is like, you had basically the late 70s when the U.S. Defense Department was connecting universities and different organizations of the government. That's kind of like the early internet. And then the kind of early 90s is when it started to get more commercialized and consumer facing. It's like, if you think about crypto, we're still at the equivalent of like 1989 for the internet, right? It's just like, if you think about that was 30 years ago. So it's probably 20 to 30 years of development of user interfaces, business models for crypto. And it's just, although crypto is moving even faster than the internet did in terms of adoption, right? So maybe you could shrink that 30-year timeline down to like 10 or 15 years. Having said that, there's a long way to go. And I think the kind of milestones you're seeing is like, you're seeing, for example, the SEC Commissioner Chairman Gensler said, we're not going to ban crypto, right? That was pretty big. You're seeing all the institutional money trying to figure ways out to get into crypto. That's a huge milestone. You're seeing the corporations put it on their balance sheet. Obviously, Tesla's done it, Square's done it, a number of other, MicroStrategy obviously has done it big time with Michael Saylor. But these are all like the commercialization and the institutionalization of Bitcoin and in crypto in general. I think these are like quote unquote the inflection points. But what I'll go back to, what you guys started with Coinbase NFT, Jack called it a huge on-ramp, and then Stripe rebuilding its crypto team is like, goes back to that, man. It's like, how easy is this stuff to use? And while you're talking about Stripe, the thing that I wanted to bring up was, man, one of Stripe's board members is Mark Carney, who's he was the former Bank of England, the top guy at the Bank of England, and he's Canadian. He's also the former Bank of Canada head. So when you're talking about somebody with the gravitas to mainstream these things, it's like having Stripe with their KYC, their AML in place. And there's certain things they can't do, but there's going to be a large subset of society that's going to be way more comfortable doing the Stripe Atlas equivalent of a DAO on a click, right? Versus doing it themselves. Actually, Dapper Labs launched a DAO-specific thing also. It's called Dapper Collective. So clearly it's being attacked, right? This organization. Actually, Jack, can you talk through more what a DAO looks like and how different that is from like a regular corporation, and like to your understanding, how that could change how people organize?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this. I think the first time we brought this up was the Bitcoin week, the Live from Miami episode of NIA, and it feels like even since then the definition, or at least the understanding of it, has changed. But at a high level, I think it's like a frictionless way to like distribute equity from the beginning to a certain number of people in, coordinating to achieve something, right? And I think one of the pillars of what a DAO is and how it differs from an LLC or an S corp or whatever other traditional business structure is that there's like, it implies that there's some governance structure in place when you set it up. So maybe you say, we're going to have 100 members in this DAO. They're going to own 1% each, and everyone gets one vote on every proposal that we put through this thing. That's not something that you would put in a contract on LegalZoom or whatever legal team you would use to form an LLC. So I think I'm not as exposed to this as some people in my network, but it feels to me like the intention and the equity is distributed in a much more like by design at the beginning of the life of a DAO with like a focus or an objective in mind. And I think there's also like a lot of stuff LARPing as this thing, right? And sort of figuring it out and building the plane as it flies, which, makes a ton of sense as well. People are going to experiment, but the most effective use of the structure, I don't think we're even close to beginning seeing what it can achieve. Like aligning incentives globally and like really reducing the friction of like moving capital around. I think at a high level, that's what a DAO is trying to accomplish. And I think it just attracts. There's no crazy interview process or office building or like all of the roadmap for creating a business is compressed. And I think that is more of a philosophical difference than maybe the technicalities of the contract. But that's my understanding of it. There's probably a lot more nuance in there, but that's what I'm thinking about it so far.
And just to add, I've got a definition here if that's helpful, because and this is from a listener of the show, but also our friend Drew Riley's got a newsletter called trends.vc. You should check it out. He did a whole write-up on DAOs, and his definition here is a DAO is a group with no central... So DAOs are a group with no central management. Individuals coordinate around a shared set of rules to achieve a common goal, which is what you said. And then well-known DAOs include Bitcoin and Ethereum. They're transparent, unstoppable, user-owned networks. So I think that's quite a nice, succinct definition of it. But yeah, go on.
Sorry, I was going to say, like with the Bitcoin and Ethereum example, I think that's kind of it's interesting because there is still a person that is, or a group of people in the case of Bitcoin maybe, that are driving a very specific thing, and then people can gather around it versus like some of the DAOs now, which like, we're going to do this, everyone get involved, right? It's kind of an interesting difference.
There's like governance token. Like I don't again know enough about the Bitcoin Ethereum example, but it doesn't mean like all DAOs are just everyone is a free for all. Come and just like make decisions on the future of Ethereum. There's like different, there's a core team from what I understand who are working on it full time, and then there's contributors. So nowadays, especially in crypto, you can go and work with 3, 4, 5 of these at a time. And if you're a programmer or you're a designer, you can go and hang out in the Discord. A lot of the time they'll have like bounties and they'll have tasks, and you can just say, oh, I'm a designer, I can design this for them. And it's just a little bit more of an open, transparent way of doing it versus wear your suit and do a job interview Bilal style 2010. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I know that's a slight tangent, but I think it's a good point to bring up because I feel like DAOs are quite an important part of, this whole ecosystem. It doesn't mean there's not going to be, centralized companies that are also contributing, but we're going to see more examples of these kind of openly and these transparent organizations being built, essentially.
Make it super philosophical is like, why would a DAO exist versus a corp? Why did a corporation exist as it is, right? And so Ronald Coase is a famous economist, and he was actually talking about why the logic behind why corporation exists is because ultimately the number one thing is it reduces transaction costs. It's like if you're in 1950s and you're starting a company and you wanted an economist, you wanted an accountant, a lawyer, and some admin work. I mean, it's not like you can hit the internet and go contact these people on Fiverr, right? Like you literally got to source your neighborhood, go through your network, and the only way you can oversee their work is have them all in one place, right? So the existence and the building up of a corporation in the mid 20th century makes all the sense in the world. It's because the transaction cost of having these arm's length relationship is just impossible, right? But obviously now with the internet, and then you add this extra layer of crypto, is like the transaction cost and the friction of having someone, quote unquote, full-time working with you in a corporation has gone effectively to zero. And don't get me wrong, there are negatives to this, right? The contractor life is in many ways not, it's not a romantic life at all, right? Like you don't have health benefits, you don't have job security, and you still have to figure out ways. I mean, even today, right? Getting paid is like you got to hunt down contracts, and there are startups that help people hunt down contracts as contractors. But having said that, it's like the logic of why corporations existed, they're going away in the face of essentially frictionless communication and cooperative tools, right? So the DAO kind of fits as a logical extreme of what happens when you take away the reason for why corporations existed.
I will say, my opinion though is, I think it's amazing that these things exist, and I think we're going to see more of them. And this is something I haven't fully thought through properly, but my opinion is that for certain types of organizations, you need less people making decisions than more. So like sometimes having, like an Apple, for example, if Apple was a DAO, I don't think it works to the level it is today. You get what I mean? Maybe there'll be other benefits and they'll do amazing things in a different way. And to be fair, maybe in 2021, it would be different. But I'm saying like what they did for the last 30 years or whatever, or more, a lot of that was centralized thinking, and it was about Steve Jobs, my way or the highway. Johnny Ive gets full ownership and gets to make tough decisions. And I think just having worked with, forget DAOs and crypto for a minute, just even startups in the kind of like Silicon Valley VC back mode, a lot of these companies have become more open in air quotes because of Slack, which I think was a positive step versus email. But I also find there's a lot of noise that is created, right? Totally. Because there's too many cooks in the kitchen and anyone can ask a question and everything becomes an emergency. So I think the evolution of these sort of organizations needs to account for rapid decision making and, actually executing on things, which to be fair, it seems like they are in many of these crypto cases. But that's where you're often working with a lot of technical people where you've got like a black and white ship this or don't ship it sort of work. When you include like the gray area stuff of marketing and creative and, sales, like all the kind of softer stuff, that's where I think it becomes a little bit harder to say, here's a bounty for this particular task. So anyway, I think it's overall a positive thing. But yeah, just wanted to share that. And just one other thing I want to call out is there's a differentiation from the original question, inflection points. There's a differentiation to be made between the technology moving forward and the industry moving forward versus the price of assets and the price of Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. Because I think a lot of the time people put those two things together. And let's say we go into a bear market, which likely will happen. And this was also a question we're going to touch on. There's generally cycles of bull markets and bear markets. Right now, we're still pretty much in a bull market. In 2018, when everything dropped 80%, there was still teams around the world building stuff, and they kept progressing. NFTs, started to ramp up in their own world. They built the technology for that. Ethereum kept progressing, but the price of everything dropped, which normally means a lot of people are no longer interested like they were previously. So I guess the question for you guys is, how do you feel like how will things be different this time if we do go into a bear market in the next 2 years or so?
In terms of the amount of people that will shake out?
Yeah, basically. And the inflection, to me, it's part of the inflection points, because at some point we're going to get in a negative spiral where there's all the FUD and, the bear market, if there is one, in the way that it usually has been. How do you see that playing out with all the other things we kind of touched on?
Wow, enough of the FUD, man. Jesus Christmas, Bilal. What is going on, bro? You're scaring me. I'm selling some Bitcoin right now, man. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Jack.
Go ahead, Jack. What are you saying?
I mean, I think there's like an exponential difference between the market then and now, just in terms of like of the saturation and understanding and adoption and the status of players that are like, I think even back in 2017, 2018, like there was no mention of this stuff in congressional hearings, and like it was such a fringe concept on like financial news, everything. And you know, famous last words, this time it's different, but it does feel like there is at least we've kind of reached at least a point of no return on the people who are in it, I think. Like you get past the point of understanding, and I think of the like broader, there's way more people that have been onboarded into crypto culture, but from 2017 to 2021 than there was from like the beginning of time to 2017. And I think like that, like, I think people are aware of the risks, and even as a culture and a society, like that risk tolerance has increased exponentially in 3 or 4 years, just based on the volatility of the world and the way things are operated, and coronavirus and all of these other things that people have just like, we just had such a stark contrast in how everything works in the last few years that it's probably inevitable that you're going to get a massive market movements in both directions. But it feels to me like the value proposition is so ingrained at this point that like no one's going to abandon, not no one, I say the percentage of people that will completely abandon the idea of like global networks of cooperation and payment and things of that nature just feels like it's not going to happen in the same way that it did back then. There was all this regulatory speculation, like, oh, one day someone's just going to come and say Bitcoin's illegal, Ethereum's illegal, like you can't transact in this, that, and that, or if you put this into your bank. I think the maturity of all the businesses building on and off ramps at this point, we saw that Andreessen Horowitz thing come out. I hadn't read the totality of it, but people building, you know.
What's the Andreessen Horowitz thing? Can you tell the listeners, Jack?
So as far as I understand it, they're like setting up a division that is dedicated to crypto policy.
Lobbying, basically, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lobbying thing, but they're like, here's the vision we have for the implementation of crypto and Web3 in a way that will, you know, be beneficial to the economy and etc. So that feels to me like what was this like speculative thing that no one was sure whether or not it would ever cross the mainstream threshold 3 years ago is now like everybody has some exposure to it. I imagine the Thanksgiving conversation will be different for a lot of people this year.
You want to talk about inflection points, right? That's one of the, I mean, you nailed it. That's one of the inflection points is like, it's almost inconceivable that this thing will get wiped by the Western governments. I mean, China's a different story, right? It's its own thing. But in the United States now, I mean, the whole crypto space is worth $3 trillion. And Jack said, how many people are involved? How many hundreds of millions of people have some exposure to crypto? It's because so much of it is psychology, right? So you can actually be very safe now as an individual to believe that it won't get wiped by regulate. That's a massive inflection point. No, but I mean, like,
no, I agree.
No, but I mean, to your point, right? Listen, I'm not Bilal Zaidi here trying to fund people out of their holdings.
How did I become the fun one? I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, the Fiat fan is now the one being like, "Hey guys, we've crossed the Rubicon. There's no going back." I mean, it really does feel like there's no going back, right? And well, there's 2 points I'd like to make. Is number one is, if there's a massive sell-off, we know there's going to be support from Michael Saylor. So the furthest this thing's going to drop is $20,000, right? Yeah, you know,
he's just going to be the support line. It's just going to be a Saylor support.
It's the Atlas and the boulder.
Bro, you know Michael Saylor will single-handedly keep this thing above 20K. Michael Saylor and Pump will keep it above 20K. The other one...
Trunk, can I just say, since you're accusing me of being FUD, right? No, just to clarify, what I mean by this is, so clearly I'm very pro all of this. I'm just trying to ask questions to figure out, like, what would happen
always
if that
asking questions, bro. That's how it always starts. Just asking questions.
But look, just to paint a picture for people who weren't following it super closely, which is probably no one, because everyone listening to this is into this stuff. But in 2017, the price of Bitcoin from around now, which is beginning of October, went from roughly, I think, 5K all the way up to 20K hit the height, right? Like near Christmas or whatever it was. Everyone's at home. I had my ledger with me and I thought I was retiring, right? So that was kind of the euphoria moment. And then in the next year, I don't know the exact timeline, it dropped around 80% or something like that.
It fell down to like 3.5, I think. 3.5.
Exactly. Yeah. And even up
that was your moment to retire, Bilal.
That was it. Yeah, exactly.
Well, listen, if Bilal never sold his Google, he could also retire. So there's a lot of
that's true.
There's a lot of moments when Bilal can look back and like
that's for sure. But anyway, what I'm saying is, I personally, and I'm not trying to make any price predictions here, but from where we are today to the end of the year, which my hope is we still continue this crazy bull run.
100. Just say it, bro.
I'm saying a drop from that moment, which I think is just the natural flow that we've seen for 10 years, right? It might be slightly different this time, but I agree with what you both said. I do think it is different this time because each time there's this huge bull run, more people get involved, more people learn about it, and you become like not just someone who's speculating, but someone who understands what's actually going on. I'd put myself in that versus last time where I was like, how do I make money from it? So I do think it's different. And I think if you just think of like the adoption curve, we're kind of in the early majority stage probably, right? So it's like where people were just these people hacking in a room. We're getting to the point where people hear about it all the time. So I do think it's going to be different, but I do think there will be a bear market. That is, to me,
yo, Jack, get this guy out of here, man. Mute this guy. No.
I'm just covering myself, son.
Hold on. Bilal, let me add a couple words about so I did a little Michael Saylor. I know Jack earlier. I know Jack's gone down this rabbit hole. I don't know if Bilal has, but Jack, you've definitely gone down like multiple hours of listening and watching Michael Saylor, yeah?
Many hours, yeah.
I went through one recently, which I'll be very honest to the listeners here, is like fully convinced me that Bitcoin's inevitable. Like
you bought more that day, right?
Yeah. But I'm 100% on board. And I went down a rabbit hole, and but he's like, he had a great explanation for why it's so volatile. Like I hate how like logical and well thought out this guy is. It's just like, he's like, yeah, man, Bitcoin trades 24/7. It's a global asset, and people can go 10 to 100 times levered, right? It's like no wonder something crazy is gonna happen. It's just like the amount of trading and leverage involved is just orders of magnitude more than with the stock market, right? And that just makes all the sense in the world to me. But then he's like, whatever, you put it on a log graph, it doesn't matter, right? You just look at it, it's just like this. And I just loved his, all I'll add is that I'm sure a lot of listeners have heard it, but like the one that really crystallized with me is just his explanation of, it's just monetary energy, right? It's like the way he describes Bitcoin as what is ultimately money and money systems, right? It's like moving information around, and Bitcoin is just like the greatest way ever to store this monetary energy. And he's like, if you think about what are sails on a sailboat, they're to capture wind, right? And wind energy. It's like Bitcoin is, if you think about it from a physics standpoint, is the exact same. And it is based literally in physics, right? It's like all the energy that's being used to mine. It's like, this is like the perfect instrument. And yeah, man, I didn't know how I got
Fan is out the game.
Bro, I'm like, dude. But anyways, the only reason I'm dropping those two things is like, I wanted the Saylor quote of the joke about Saylor as a price support. And more so, it's just, man, just crystallized in my head recently, going down the rabbit hole.
Which interview was it, Tron?
With Diamandis.
Mate, you got to do the 12-hour What is Money with Robert Breedlove. Okay. That will get you, mate.
You're done.
Get that on in the car.
I'll listen to that, to be fair.
Oh, mate, the opening line, I think he describes a eagle like dropping a mountain goat over the side of a cliff. Mate, it's just unbelievable. You got to listen to it. It's
the visual language he's got. He's just nailed the visual language, right?
He's an incredible marketer, man. Just unbelievable, next level. And because of, I think, his background, it's like you don't even think of what he's saying as marketing. You think it was like a physics teacher or something. Oh yeah, but dude, he's a genius marketer.
It's incredible.
But I was just gonna say, like, just to follow up on what you both said around the like. One of his other points, not to make this a Saylor fest, but the inevitability of a network when it gets to a certain size. It like one of his, I think it's like 19, maybe early 2000s. Sorry, when was the first iPhone? 2008?
2007 was when
2007. So I think this interview has to be 2009 or something. So I was way off. But he starts to talk about like Apple as a network, and it's like the rate at which this network is growing. And I think he has like some benchmark of like he talks about Apple, Amazon, maybe there's another couple of examples.
Probably
but
Facebook.
Facebook's another good example. So past a certain size, these networks are just like, it's like they're unstoppable.
They're perpetual.
Right?
They're self-perpetuating. Yeah.
The speed at which they proliferate, and like those networks actually have more standing in their way because they have to like negotiate with different governments and get like Bitcoin is a few layers below that, right? And it's achieved that same level of significance. The other thing I was going to say is maybe the crypto, like the best analogy for the crypto, that like crossing the Rubicon thing that we talked about, like if you layer the analogy onto like internet adoption, right? Where you like people when the .com bubble was going on, and I was way too young to sort of be like have a comprehension of what was happening there. You may be like while that was happening and after it happened, you're like, oh, maybe this whole internet thing is kind of a joke and it's not going to work. And then you see like the phoenixes rise from the ashes of that, and it's like, okay, what's actually true is that's an amazing technology, but 99% of people didn't know what the hell they were doing or weren't like executing properly against the infrastructure that existed. And I think people now are on the other side of that argument with crypto, where it's like, okay, it's pretty obvious how this can be beneficial to a lot of people around the world, unbanked people, like, you know, the systematic differences between this and legacy finance are completely obvious at this point. So yeah, maybe there's a market correction, but there will continue to be people that execute against it. And you got the Stripes, the Coinbases of the world. Like, I think you probably could make the argument that this industry is attracting the most capable people in the world
100%.
At a ridiculous clip.
Yeah. Dude, the other thing too, to your point, I think we probably wrap up this whole section with this one is, well, Bilal can have a last thought. I'm sure he's going to have some more fun for us, but so all the companies that went down in 99, right? Like the famous ones like Webvan, pets.com, they were all like potential business models. It's just the internet was way too early, right? The bandwidth wasn't there. And the mobile phone wasn't there. It was like, man, a lot of the ones, I mean, all the delivery companies, they existed 20 years ago. It just didn't make any sense then, right? So like, of course things will flame out, but it's like once the infrastructure is in place, namely, I think we touched on it, it's like, how easy can somebody make it for a regular person like my mom to interface with crypto, right? And you probably will lose a lot of that, unfortunately, some of the decentralization aspect. But yeah, my mom's just not going to have a metal plate thing of seed words like hidden in the back of her garden, right? Like it's just not going to happen. So yeah, that for me is I think a good just to wrap up the whole inflection point convo. I think we nailed some pretty good topic points of interest there. Bilal, last words. Is Bitcoin going to zero?
No, complete. No, look, to clarify again, I clearly believe in this stuff. More than 50% of my liquid money is in this stuff. Yeah. Right? So I'm still holding. I've pretty much never sold almost anything. Right. So I clearly do believe in that. But the way I see it when I zoom out is I'm like looking at 5-10 years plus. And therefore, I'm okay when it goes in 2018, it drops 8% because the 8% was from a crazy high. So my point here is if we go from 55 to 200K, which I think is more than possible, right? At the end of this year, I'm just saying this as an example, right? I'm not saying
not investment advice.
Not investment advice, definitely. And then if this time next year we were back to 70K, that sounds like a crazy drop, but we're still way higher than it was a year ago. Yeah. Exactly. So that's to me the definition of when someone might say that's a bear market. That's often where you go and reaccumulate, you keep buying. So to me, I'm thinking long term. I think Bitcoin, Ethereum especially will be around for a long, long time. The question for me is the other altcoins, a lot of the NFTs that aren't blue chip. Like that's how I'm thinking of it as someone who is investing all my money as well. So it's not to say it's going away, obviously. Like that's why I was trying to separate the adoption and technology versus price. Yeah. The last thing I'll say is younger people, I think to add to your case, what both of you just said, younger people are expecting higher returns. Right now, we've got a whole generation of people who I was listening to the Pump show like this morning, and one of the Pump brothers, who's 25, said that all his friends don't want to invest in something unless there's at least a 10x potential for 10x, right? So us guys who've grown up with S&P 500, 8 to 12% or whatever we're aiming for, are like, we're okay with it growing 20, 50% and knowing that it just brings everything else up. But there's a whole generation of people who are Wall Street bets, basically gambling a lot of their money, up and down, which I love. Don't get me wrong. I think it's great that young people are investing. But I think that's another thing we're kind of underestimating. There's like hundreds of millions of people of that age group whose expectation is a crazy amount of return.
You know what, though, more than ever is like being able to buy and hold actually becomes a superpower. Is like
exactly.
Well, dude, I put up a stat the other day. I can wrap up on this with this stat. It was like, I don't know if you guys saw, but like, so KKR, the big PE giant, has $460 billion in assets under management. The Henry Kravis and George Roberts, which were the co-CEOs, they both stepped down, and they have two new co-CEOs now, both veterans of the firm. But the whole point of why I'm bringing this up is I read an old Forbes article, 2019, and George Roberts, one of the R in KKR, he calculated that if KKR had held on to all their positions, because they're a private equity fund, they have to liquidate. They have some permanent capital now, but that wasn't the entirety of the firm. They'd be bigger than Berkshire Hathaway, right? That's what the guy came up with. He's like, if we had kept all our investments, so it's two parts of it. It's like be good at investing, and then also you have to hold on to those investments. We would have been bigger than Berkshire. So man, it says, Bilal, I think that brings up a very interesting point, man. It's like, the reality is you can't have 10x returns, right? And everything. It's like, it's just like
forever, especially. Yeah, forever. Maybe you can for a year or two or even 5, but like.
So if you can just have the mindset where like, man, dude, it's just so hard to think long-term. It just really is, right? It's just so hard to think long-term. But if you can, it's like, it really is a superpower, because just being able to buy and hold makes a huge difference. And listen, man, dude, you didn't sell through the crash. Neither of you guys did. So you guys are both believers, right? There's no question about it. I mean, Bilal, you told us, so it's like you didn't sell when it crashed. You still have what you bought.
I locked out by purpose because I said, I don't want to think about it. I'm going to put it in cold storage, and like, I don't want to be tempted to press a button on my phone. So exactly for that reason. And so I think that was a great discussion, man. I think there's lots to take away from that. Anything else from you, Jack, before we move on to Axie Infinity?
One more point on the volatility. Your point about like, you see these massive rises and then maybe you correct back down to, in a year's time, there's a gain. And I think one of the like under discussed things about this is how powerful the Bitcoin narrative is relative to other assets, where if Bitcoin gets to 100, 150, 200,000, everyone in the world is like, Bitcoin's going to replace my money. It's not like a run up stock like a GME, or like, say Apple goes on a tear or something. It's not like, my God, there's never going to be another technology to a company to invest in. Bitcoin does have this like completely different vibe to it, right? Where it's like,
and the network effect is unique for that reason, right?
The entire future of money is changing. I need to get on this train, or I'm destroyed here, right? So I think like.
So what you're saying is there is no second best. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, actually, dude, to Jack's point is like, he talked about the narrative this is the simplest crystallization of it all. There will be $70 trillion handed down from our parents' generation down to us, right? The millennials from the Gen Xers, or I guess even baby boomers, 70 trillion. How much of that is going to gold? Legitimately, right? What percentage of that $70 trillion is going to gold or to a value ETF, right? It's like, that's all you need to think about. It's just, where is this wave of $70 trillion going if you're being fully real with yourself?
There's probably more going into cryptos than gold.
No.
Crypto's market cap.
Well, I gotta say, man, like the number of people in the Telegram group with cryptos. I commend you all. I'm sitting on the sidelines just watching all you legends just make them gains. Oh my goodness! All right,
that was a good chat, boys. That was really, really good. Jack, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Was there anything else?
Oh yeah, Jack, sorry, man.
No, I think
That was
just fear and greed is exponential in an asset like this. Is all I'm like. That's how I'd end it.
Yeah, that's a great way to summarize, man. All right, boys. Yeah, that was really good. I enjoyed that. All right, let's talk about Axie Infinity. We've mentioned it a few times on the show. I know, Trung, you've been digging into it a little bit, and specifically the model. I think the question you were trying to answer was, will this model work in the future? Omar asked, will this model work in the future, and will it be the go-to model? So first of all, why don't we explain what Axie Infinity is and what model he's talking about, right? Because, yeah.
So yeah, I'll walk again. This is not any of my original thinking, man. This is all from John Lai, the Andreessen Horowitz partner. I think he does gaming, but he's written a number of threads on Axie and just a little bit of Axie reading. But so the first thing I'll say about Axie is this: the CEO's name is Trung. Like, let's just set the stage. He's on to a winner. This Trung is way more legit than me, man, and way richer, right? So let's just put that. So this is literally a Vietnamese dude. I think he lives in Ho Chi Minh City, where I lived for 5 years, but he's way richer than me. I'm going to say that again. Trung Nguyen is his name. He's way richer than me, but no, all right, dude. Axie Infinity, here it is. Sky Mavis is the name of the game maker. And so the founding legend of Axie Infinity, which from a top level you can think of as a Pokemon built with NFTs. So that's like, that should be the heuristic for you. Pokemon's built with NFTs. That's a lot of buzzwords, but we'll tease that out. So they started the game basically after seeing CryptoKitties, which if people don't remember, during the run-up that Bilal talked about earlier, the 2017 run-up, CryptoKitties was created by Dapper Labs, which is the team behind NBA Top Shop. So they basically created the first NFT type of collectible, right? Which were these kittens, these digital kittens that you could breed, and like each would have individual features, which we are now very familiar with Bored Ape Yacht Club and obviously Toads. But like CryptoKitties was the first round of that. And Trung Nguyen, this legend, saw what was happening in CryptoKitties and wanted to kind of build a game using that breeding mechanic. And he created Axie Infinity. So the company started in 2018. And basically what you do in this game you create is well, have any of us actually tried to figure out how to play Axie Infinity yet?
I've not played it. I've watched like videos on how it works. But
what about Jack? What about you?
I'm all signed up to it, but I never played.
Did you sign up? Can you walk us through the sign up flow? Because this is a big part of it. Huge friction to sign up for this game.
It's
right?
very hard, yeah, because you need a special wallet and
Ronin wallet.
You have to.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's like two different. There's two. I'm not even going to be able to say it accurately. Like I bumbled through it, and I was like, I can't even figure out how to like buy the thing and participate.
Yeah, there's like
game.
love potion or something.
Okay, so there's 8 steps. It's an 8-step process just to join this game, right? So huge friction to join it. But basically, I think Jack touched on it, is like you need basically 2 wallets. You have to transfer your Ethereum over. You have to buy the special, the Smooth Love Potion, the SLP, which is the token to play in this game. And then you have to breed, I think, 3 of these NFTs, which are called Axies. They're basically like these characters, right? And these cartoon or digital characters. So huge friction to play this game. I think it's estimated now to start playing, it costs $1,500, like to own all these assets. But once you're in this world now, you can start accumulating more of the in-game currency, right? So it's called play to earn. And you can do it by going on adventures. You do it by competing against other Axies. And it's kind of created this whole economy in this Axie Infinity world. And how it's really kind of hit the mainstream and interest in the public is like 40% of the users are in the Philippines. Okay. And they're actually able to make 2 to 3 times what they would make in a year playing Axie Infinity. So they're literally playing to earn, right? And it's gone to the point where actually the Filipino revenue agency, or the equivalent of the IRS in the Philippines, is trying to hunt down Axie players and trying to get their cut of the goods. I bet
those guys don't play around.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, the Filipino government. Well, I'll tell you about my wife's Filipino. I've been to Philippines a lot. Oh, this is a tangent, but Duterte, the president, he's got the greatest nickname ever, is Duterte Harry. And
oh my God, how did I not see that coming?
So all you need to know is this guy's not messing around. But so the two things I'll summarize is it's basically Pokemon meets NFTs, and then it's a very long onboarding process. But even with this extremely difficult onboarding process, it has exploded, right? It did between when it started in 2018 to July of this year, it did 21 million in revenue and not revenue. Yeah, in revenue. So they take a 4.5% cut of any in-game transaction.
So sorry, is 21 million their cut or is that the total?
No, that's their cut. So
that's their cut. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
That's from 2018 to July. Since July, they've done $500 million.
Oh my God.
Okay, so like
Insane.
It's literally like this, right? It is a hockey stick. If you're listening, you can't see my fingers. It's going up and to the right. So to summarize, there's a third piece. So it's exploded now. And then, so that is the background of this game. It is NFT meets Pokemon. It's very hard to onboard, but enough people are on it and there's insane volume going on. So the people that are playing are loving it. And a lot of it is actually, I mean, some of it is just people literally, their livelihoods, right? It was made in Vietnam. 40% of the gamers are from the Philippines. Okay, so next part here that we're going to talk about is to answer Omar's question is like, does this mechanic of playing to earn, is this kind of the future? Okay, so the first thing that I'll say about Axie Infinity is that they take a 4.5% cut of the in-game activity. That's already a huge difference versus an EA or an Activision Blizzard, which basically take 100% of in-game purchases. Go ahead,
I was
Jack.
just going to plug one reference there. You know, the Chris Dixon, your take rate is my opportunity.
Exactly.
He unpacks this.
Yeah, that's a great one.
He unpacks that. I actually got a DM from one of our listeners, and he brought up a good point. Though, was like the difference between take rates isn't actually dependent on crypto, right? Like EA could just choose to lower the take rate. It doesn't have to be crypto native for that.
But is it the distribution of funds though that would be like very hard for EA to do?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think there's like the counter to his counter is basically like because there's this in-game kind of token, and that makes it way easier to distribute funds. And there's no centralized authority doing that, right? So let me just finish this last point, then you guys can start hitting me or dropping your points. But all I'll say is this: is like John Lai basically said, what makes a play to earn game work is he compared basically why play to earn doesn't work, in what games it doesn't work in, and in the games it does work in. So he says there's basically 3 ways where a play to earn game can work. And then the 3 reasons are this: is like there have to be many ways of winning that game. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2 is the inputs have to be tokenized and tokens rather than finished goods. I'll unpack all these, but I just want to give a top line. And the third part, and actually this is to Jack's point, the third part is the markets have to be decentralized. So now let me unpack that. The first explanation for games that can work for play to earn is there have to be multiple paths to winning. So the example he uses as one that didn't work is Diablo. So in Diablo, the way that you won the game, quote unquote, was by basically killing monsters and receiving loot for successfully killing monsters. When Diablo introduced an auction type of economic element, it totally broke the game because now the users, if the only goal of that game is to kill monsters and win loot, they were just buying their way to victory. So that's a big difference, right? So this is the difference with Axie Infinity. There are many ways to win in Axie Infinity. You can finish the side quests, you can breed animals that you like the look of them, or you can compete against other users. So there's like many ways to quote unquote win. It's like some people will literally just spend the entire game breeding animals, right? So that's point number 1 is like, are there many ways to win this game for play to earn and make sense? Number 2 is what is the input for the game itself? Is like in Diablo, they're selling finished goods. You're basically just buying like hammers, right? But in Axie Infinity, you're breeding things that can have different outcomes. So again, it's almost similar to like how many different ways are to win. Is like, can you create a world where people have can just kind of hang around. And that's kind of the other element. The third part is what Jack touched, is like decentralized. Is like you can't have a central authority deciding where all the economic value is. And the point that John Lyon brought up, which is the last thing I'll say, is the most downvoted comment in Reddit ever is from EA when they basically, do you guys remember this? Somebody got mad at them for like forcing them to buy like a Vader lightsaber or something to that effect. And then EA is like, hey, listen, like these are just how the game is played. And it's like the most downvoted thing in Reddit history. And John Lyon's whole point is that like, you can't have a centralized authority dictating how this marketplace is going to run, right? If you want it to be play to earn.
And like, wouldn't EA have to like send 5 million 1099s and do KYC on everybody? Like just the way crypto infrastructure is built versus EA.
That's
like,
a good point.
Well, you have to put direct deposit information in, and they're going to send money to your bank account, and like they're a money transmitter, and all, like crypto is just a whole different animal entirely.
No, I think you should tease this out. But like based on everything you heard from what I said, it's like I think you're on the path now of why. To answer Omar's question, is this the future of gaming? I would say it would have to meet the criteria that we just talked about, because like, again, I'll reiterate, is like, number one is if the mechanic of the game only has one way to win, you literally break the game by introducing markets to it, right? Like Diablo, you broke the game because people will just buy their way to victory. But if there's many ways to win and you can create a whole world, basically an economy like Axie Infinity, it doesn't break the game to introduce economics, right? So I think that's very important.
And actually, Trung, just to zoom out a little bit, like to give people a sense of like where this came from in the first place, because historically games, like when we were growing up, you just paid for the game, right? Like you bought FIFA or Streets of Rage or Street Fighter, and you came home and you missed your exams, right? Like that's what we did, right? And then after a while, this thing came about called free to play. And I'm not a gaming expert at all, but I interviewed a guy called Kevin Chu. He's a founder of Rally, and he had like 2 big gaming companies before and an e-gaming company. So if you're interested, listen to that because he knows his stuff. So it went from paid for games, free to play. And now this is kind of the evolution of that, where no longer is it just free to play. It's actually you're getting paid to play.
Yeah.
And just a caveat being now what you mentioned with Axie, it's not a pure free to play now because you have to pay for the Axie up front. And that's why they've even got these things called scholarships where people are renting out their Axies essentially, which is kind of incredible. And that's a whole different topic.
No, I think we should tease that out actually, because this helps answer Omar's question.
Okay.
It's like to answer, so this is another element which makes it extremely attractive for it being quote unquote a model that can be used in the future. So again, John Lyon literally talked about what you said, Bilal. He said Axie created a whole new end game. So this goes back to his original point, which is how many ways are there to win? So a new way for a user of Axie Infinity to win now is like you play hard for 3 months, you collect this team of people, and then if you're tired of the game or don't really want to play anymore, you lend it, like Bilal said, to other players. And the players now can earn to play with your characters and you get a cut of it. So that's another level of this
it's amazing.
Game. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy that exists? It's wild, like cabs, man. Like in New York or whatever. Like a lot of those people don't own their own cars. They just
rent the medallion, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're just renting out to their boy, and then they'll be like, all right, just give me 20% or 10% or whatever.
Omar's question, that's what you were going to say, Bilal, yeah?
Yeah, I was going to say, to answer his question specifically, will this be the go-to model or will it evolve from here into something else?
My thesis on that is like, I'm going to do another Saylorism. It's like you compete for network effect however you can get it. So if maybe the greatest way to get network effect, or the only way people were experimenting with network effect 5 years ago, was have a really good online game, and people will go to GameStop and pay $60 for it and then pay $50 a month to just play it with their mates. That worked 5 years ago. But now it's like, how do you incentivize network effect? And that will change over time, obviously. With Axie Infinity, maybe the first incentive was like, cool game, free to play. Then the next incentive was like, oh, you can make a load of money doing this. So that's worth going through 8 steps of sign up to get there. And then like you as a person who owns 10 things can expand this out to 5 more people. So it feels to me like financial incentive is like one of the most powerful catalysts for network effect. In my opinion, that's going to be like if you're making a decision between playing a game for 2 hours where you earn zero or playing a game where you make money, majority of people on Earth are going to opt for the second
if all
option.
things else are the same, like they're both as enjoyable, fun, whatever. Yeah.
Just Charlie Munger it, man. Show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome.
Well, and just to your point, Jack, I think you're right, mate. The only opportunity I see to evolve from what Axie has right now in its current form are those two areas. One is not having 8 steps to start, right? Because that's something someone can go and like grease the wheel there. And then the second part is if it's now $1,500 or whatever it is to start the game, right? Like most people can't afford that in a lot of parts of the world. So yeah, then you've got these sub-economies of scholarships. But if you didn't have to have a scholarship, that's another area where you could have a complete free-to-play pure version of this again. Yeah. So maybe there's another opportunity. And I know there's people creating these free-to-play things on other blockchains as well. And you know, taking what's worked with Axie and trying to like reinvent it. So I think we're going to be in a place, honestly, where there's both. Like you're going to have the Fortnites, you're going to, where there's a metaverse and Travis Scott is doing a concert and like you might pay entrance to get to it and pay for the Virgil's like clothes in it or whatever. But then I do think there's going to be more of these sorts of kind of platforms. So I don't know. Yeah, what is anything else to close it out for you guys?
No, I think that's the perfect answer. I'll add my last part and then we'll throw it over Jack. Was just I think Omar's answer is like, is it the future? Is like it's a future, and there is a place to exist for the other one. To Jack's point, all things equal, if you can make money playing and be entertained, you're probably going to choose that one.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this last week or I had this conversation with myself. But the idea that we asked, like, is this the future? Like, it's happening, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think the weird thing that we do as people is like, we always like consolidate it down to like, which cryptocurrency is going to be the only cryptocurrency, and which game model is going to be the game model. It's like, what's going on right now is just going to be a more insane version of that into the future. So there'll be like games that are going vertical on the adoption curve, and then there'll be stuff like Axie where you can earn minimum wage in 2 years' time, right? Because the efficiency of markets has eventually, you know, reached a plateau in all these different places. But yeah, I think that's like a blind spot for all of us, is that we're like living through a reality and we're still asking questions about like what's real, and stuff is already happening.
So 100%. What you're saying, Jack, is there is a second best.
Yeah. There's always something growing faster, but there's always something like there's always higher risk in spending all your time there or putting all your capital there, right?
Hold on, we need to talk about this. Is like, so Jack got Bored Ape, he got Tom Sachs, he got Cryptos. He doesn't want to take credit for any of that, but could you imagine if Jack was toting Axie Infinity back in March and then like it rolled? But dude, that would have been the quadfecta. I mean, you started down the road,
crazy.
Right? I mean, you started down the road.
Yeah, the game itself, like, was just I get my blind spot in gaming is I don't play games really, and I look at this stuff. I'm like, how can millions of people be playing this shit?
But did you not feel like that with Farmville and all that stuff as well?
Same, dude. Yeah, Mafia.
I did, yeah. And you're like, still blowing up your notifications every 20 minutes
on Facebook. Right? 2008. Well, the other thing I was going to say is, as soon as there's a football manager or championship manager version of this, where they've got the football teams and the players as NFTs, where I can spend 14 hours a night doing it like I did at school, I would 100% retire if that was the case.
NIA podcast is cancelled. Bilal's gone full time.
playing football manager. All right, that was great, boys. I think that was a good way to wrap it up. Let's just bang out this last question from the group. We've got a little bit of time just to chat this through on social tokens. Matt O'Brien asks, what role do you see social tokens playing in helping creators turn their audiences into communities? I think we've touched on this a little bit before, but we haven't done like a whole segment on it. So any thoughts from either of you?
Yeah, I don't have any strong feelings on this, Jack.
Yeah. You know what? There's this thing that's been going around Twitter the last week or so. I think Mike Cernovich made it like really popular, but the idea that there were 170 creators on Gumroad that earned 100 grand last year. I was one of them. And
Wow.
the idea that the creator economy is this, promise of, hey, go out onto the internet and make content and you can pull down multiple six figures a year is not untrue, but it's also like there's a hugely wide gamut of outcomes in that. And I think I guess there's a parallel here to the Axie thing. Like, you can apply a mechanic to something, but if the market doesn't want the thing, it doesn't matter, right? Like, social tokens are a really efficient way to raise capital, but if no one wants to pay for the thing that you're doing, what difference does it make? I do see there being like a more powerful incentive again for like the people in certain situations to like further accelerate their growth. Like a creator that's selling a product that you don't have a stake in is not going to get the same virality that you're seeing in these NFT projects because there's no financial upside for every single one of the people in their network, right? So I think it's a really powerful tool. I think people will use it to do amazing things and raise a lot of money for them and their communities, but it's like, it doesn't fix the problem of like having something interesting to say or building a business at scale. So I think it's kind of the same as anything. And maybe I'm not making that profound of a point here, but I think
power laws, man, it's like the reality is that it's going to accrue to the best of the best and
even more like it's way more cutthroat in this world, right? Because it's like these are graphs that you're looking at now. We've talked about BitClout in this context too.
Exactly,
it's like,
right?
Do people really want to see their market cap and how healthy is it for like an individual to wake up every day and you essentially have 2,000 shareholders or 4,000 shareholders in a Discord channel every day? Like, what the hell's going on, buddy? Like, your market cap's dropped $10 overnight. You don't even have the 12-week, the 12-week financial reporting. And we talked about roadmaps and all of that stuff. So yeah, social tokens are cool technology. And I think people who can like tolerate that level of scrutiny and maybe have like the team and the like vision in place to grow can use a technology like that. But I think rushing into launching an instrument like that is probably not a fantastic idea in that like it just places an extreme amount of pressure on you and turns you into a financial instrument. However you want to look at it, like the way people interact with you will change if your performance loses their money. Like that's a really massive thread that we can unpack about Web3 in general. Like, I think the promise of being able to join a network permissionlessly that's already succeeding is awesome. And like, if you can structure organizations in a way that people feel like they have involvement, but no one person is like, the whole weight of something is riding on them, unless that person really wants to sign up for that. But social tokens tied to a single person, I think for the same reason BitClout is like struggling to get off the ground. It's a psychological barrier that maybe we will go past the Rubicon as we have done with some of this other stuff. But right now it feels like, people are upset about the number of likes they get on Instagram or, number of followers that unfollow them when they post something dumb or something that doesn't resonate. This is like taking that to it's quite literally your worth in a chart or a number, and that gets like really like the comparison as well of like capital flight, even on BitClout, right? This person's not growing as fast as that person, so I'm going to invest in them. And because of the short-termism or the 100x outcome or the FOMO or whatever else, that mentality is just not being instilled in the same way. And unless you're really deliberate about that as a creator, like I like to think the visualized value, not to do a self-plug here, is like the NFTs that I produce. It's not like, hey, buy this and 100x it overnight. It's like, I'm building this thing. I'm going to be building this thing for a long time. And here's like a thing that has an attachment to the success of this network that I'm building. I'm not going to report to you the financials of the business on a daily basis, and there's no chart where you can track that stuff. But tokens to me is like, that is a different animal than selling unique one-on-one NFT.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. The NFT is like it's similar. You get to participate,
but different. Yeah.
But I don't need to, I don't have to look at the price every single day. And actually, a good way to, I don't know how good of an analogy it's popped in my head, but so corporations often have the question of how do you give money back to shareholders, right? And one way is to do it by dividend, but that once you commit to a dividend, it's very risky because if you ever break it, it looks terrible for the business, right? So the other option is to do buybacks, because buybacks you can do whenever you want. And you get to give back money to shareholders, but you also can get to control when that happens. Whereas a dividend, every quarter, it's got to come out. So it's like in the same way, it's like the social token is like almost like the dividend. Once you turn that tap on, it's a much different way. It's like, it's got to be coming. If it doesn't come, something bad's happening. Whereas a one-time buyback, or whenever you want to do a special buyback, it's like the NFT, right? Here it is. Enjoy yourself. It's like, maybe you'll get some more, but that's it. I don't have to interface with you on a guaranteed cadence.
Yeah, the earning stuff is really crazy. Like, that's when it starts to get to like, I mean, dividend stock is like a socially accepted Ponzi scheme, essentially, right? It's like this business has to keep growing for everyone to keep getting paid. And we talked about this on the last episode. Like, that's what has to happen in every instance for this to appreciate in value. This person or this team has to keep doing whatever it is they do to make more people want to buy it or make people want to pay more for it. And that's hard to do.
Yeah.
The other thing to add on communities is, I think there are some unique things you can do with a token. In the same way, I think the NFT example is really good, because you're basically saying, here's access, here's a pass to our community. And I think where it might work a little bit better is versus it being one person, it could be like a little mini organization. So for example, Tom Osman, Shiny Object, I think they've got a token, or he's launching one or something like that. And for something like that, everyone knows it's his face and his name attached to that, but it's not by the Tom Osman coin, it's by the Shiny Object Club token or whatever. And by being a part of that, by doing tasks, by being within the community, you can earn some of those things. So I think that's where there can be some really cool use cases. And but I think the way I always think about these things is, can I do this? Like, is there a reason for it to be a token? Do you get what I mean? Like, sometimes we just like to use the new stuff, when sometimes $1 works too, and sometimes an NFT might work, like you said. So like we've talked about for our stuff, NIA, like if we ever did a official community in the future, right now we just have a Telegram group of people hanging out, but like what would that look like? And so, yeah, we would have to have that discussion. Like, would it be a token? Would it be an NFT? Would it just be a Discord with dollars, like a Patreon style thing where people get extra access? So yeah, Jack, I can see you thinking about something. Go for it.
I was just going to say, like, maybe a good heuristic for it is like a mini IPO or something, where it's like you get to a stage in your business or your community or your product where it's like, we can prove traction and we can, like, we're going to market to offer stake in this thing, versus like the way you would, and maybe nobody's even thinking about it this way. I'm just coming at it from the like, hey, should I launch a social token because they're like a thing, in the same way that a lot of people message me and be like, hey, I want to get into NFTs. And I'm like, why?
Right.
One, why would anyone buy that from you? And like, this is just the age old question, I think, is like, what, and Bilal, you just brought this up, is like, yeah, just ask, why would a token make sense in this instance versus, just going to market with a product or a subscription business? And I think like crypto is such a shiny object, excuse the correlation to Tom Osman's
Aussie
community. Yeah, shout out to shiny objects. But the idea that like this can lead people down the path of like just layering in a technology for technology's sake, instead of leveraging something that actually makes the experience better for everyone and makes the...
That's easier, yeah.
Yeah, and like it aligns with what the person is creating and they're like comfortable with psychologically, because it is like, I have friends who've launched NFT projects and they've got a bunch of traction, and then they're just on the wheel of like, shit, how do we keep this going? And like, at what point does it, like, because there's so much scrutiny on the price of the asset, like if you ever need to change direction, there's like, it's a lot harder than having a, 12 or 6 or send an investor update every 3 months.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll add is on the flip side, just to round out a couple of things where I think it can be useful. Again, not to plug my stuff too much, but the chat with Kevin Chu, we talked about creator coins. Basically, that's what their business is, Rally. So we talk all about that. And one of the things he said is, we're so US centric a lot of the time because Western centric or whatever. And we just think of like, oh, everyone's got dollars or whatever. But in a game, which is what they were doing with hundreds of millions of people, like the currency thing is a big thing. So if you bring everyone into this one token that everyone uses, like Roblox has their version, Fortnite probably has their own version, that is a huge reason to use it. So if you're doing something globally and you want to bring people into that system, that's a way of you basically creating your own mini economy. And the second thing is something we've talked about with NFTs in the past, is when you're spending 7 Ethereum on a toad, right, versus 7 times $3,500, which is like whatever money nowadays.
Doesn't
like
even matter,
grand.
right?
Yeah,
what is
exactly. If you say, I'm spending, like for me, I spent 2 ETH on Toad. That was $7,000, $7,500 at a time. But if I said $7,500 in my head, I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like that's kind of crazy. But if I say 2 ETH in my head, I'm like, oh, how's that compared to how many ETH I have? So then I'm like, okay, it's not crazy, right? But it's just kind of there's this value perception of the dollars that you pay your rent in, right? So as a creator, maybe that is something you want to consider. So I think there's pros and cons there, something to watch out for. But personally, I think there's maybe better ways to do it.
I'm not trying to FUD the social tokens either. Like, we're having a couple FUD sections on this. Just like really think about what you're trying to accomplish with it. And if that mechanic makes sense, then go for it. And one of the reasons, like, I'm also sort of a little skeptical now is like, is it a security? How does it work? Like, how do you file all of this stuff? And that stuff is still nascent. And maybe when Stripe is like, let's do it, then that'll change. One thought I had while you were talking, Bilal, is like maybe the next generation's ETF is like a basket of my favorite creators' coins.
Love that.
So like you're not looking at like the movements of everybody's posts on a daily basis or whether this one person goes up or down. It's like, this is the segment of culture I love. Like, these are all the musicians I listen to. These are all the YouTubers. These are all the podcasts I listen to. That's a great one. Yeah, I'm going to bag those up. And then I can see my portfolio grow as opposed to this one thing. And maybe because we're so close to it, we're like staring at one asset. It's like, I'm thinking about it as in terms of like, person logs on, this is the only thing they're invested in, and they're just staring at it all day. And we know that's not the case, right? Even your NFT portfolio, if you've been in the game for a few months, half of it, you've probably forgotten you even bought at this point. So like the long-term bets, I think that's what we talk about on all of this stuff. That is investment advice. Is like, if you're trying to sell it tomorrow to make 10x on it, maybe it's a bad idea.
Yeah, love it.
Perfect.
Trung, anything else to wrap up, mate? I think that was
great, man. Oh, we're on a roll right now. Let's finish strong.
I love this conversation today. Yeah, and just I guess the only thing to call out from my side was it kind of relates back to what we were talking about, the inflection points. I actually think that's a great point you made about these broader, things that we're used to in a traditional world. So especially when it comes to investing, like there's no real way to buy, the ETF equivalent. Like there's a few, like I think there's one in Canada, like Bitcoin Trust or whatever it's called. And then there's like a DeFi Pulse thing where you can buy that index. But it's just, so early. Like there's going to be so many more versions of these. But like the way you just described, like the YouTubers or whatever, like there's like 4 or 5 personal finance YouTubers that I think do an amazing job of summarizing their stuff. And if they came together and were like, here's 5 of us plus another 10, you can basically invest in it as a collective. That is actually a really cool way of thinking about it.
That's compelling.
Yeah.
Well, the NIA DAO, let's build that.
That's true. Yeah. I know people asking in the Telegram.
Yeah, mate.
But I know we got to wrap up, but that was a really good chat, boys.
Yeah, that was great.
It was great. All right, boys. Well, if you're still made it here all the way, let us know in the comments below. And make sure you join the Telegram group. smash the like button, and we will see you again next week for more fun.